Hey guys, my name is Haley Barris, and for my research presentation, I am going to do movies versus their novels. So, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the differences between movies and their books. And then I'm also going to pick up on why directors and filmmakers, producers choose to cut certain things or maybe add something or cut a character or add a character to make the movie more valuable. And then I'm also going to talk about the differences just between the two forms of media, of films and of books, and how they're so different, even though they seem like they go side and side, that realistically, there's a lot that goes into translating one into the other. So to start off, I'm going to just talk about that. I'm going to talk about what makes films films and what makes novels novels. So films, they are action-based. So you get to see the plot, the storyline, the setting, all the characters right in front of your eyes. You don't have to think a whole lot. It's already there for you. You don't have to make any decisions on what they look like, none of that. It's already right in front of you. Whereas novels, they're usually narrative, so they're usually focused around one character, which is similar to movies, but in novels, you usually just get that one person's perspective. And with that, you don't get to, unless you're reading some sort of picture book, but usually you don't get to have a visualization of what your characters look like, what your setting looks like. You get to create that all by yourself, and that's what makes books still so popular today, is because you get to imagine it, which is goes with my second bullet point there under novels. Is novels use more similes, metaphors. You get to use your imagination, whereas films, they're more straight-laced. Everything that happens, you don't get to choose. It's already been put in front of the screen in front of you. Whereas, which goes with my second bullet point under films, which is films tell the story, whereas novels describe it. Lastly, one of the biggest differences between films and novels is the average screenplay, so movie, is between 7,500 and 10,000 words, whereas novels, the average novel is between 100,000 and 175,000 words. And that's on average, remember. So some films may be more, some novels may be less. I mean, it really just depends on the situation, but on average, that leaves filmmakers with a really big decision on what they need to cut, what characters are important enough to make the films, because essentially, to make the film time enough for people to actually want to sit and watch all of it, they need to cut about 80 to 90% of the novel's content. So the filmmakers have a really important and tough job to really choose the main points and the main characters of novels to make it onto the big screen. So as you can see, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of movies that were originally books to begin with. And ever since the beginning of filmmaking, people have been so interested in seeing their favorite characters from their favorite books translated onto the big screen, where they don't have to think about creating these characters. They're already in front of them. It's addicting, and ever since the beginning of filmmaking, it has been a huge success, and people still do it today. So, like I said in this presentation, I'm just going to pick a select few films that I've also read the books for to really dive into and research, as well as use my own knowledge to tell you guys the pros and cons of the books and the films, as well as how well they did together and individually, and how true they stuck, what director choices did they make to make it more successful, or maybe it didn't make it as successful. So I'm just going to choose a few of them to really dive into with you guys. So the first one is a classic. I chose Gone with the Wind. This was an original novel by Margaret Mitchell in 1938, and it was actually transformed into a movie in 1940. So before we dive into this film, I am going to actually show you guys a quick trailer in case you guys aren't familiar with it.
Gone with the Wind has captured the imagination and acclaim of the entire world. The screen has never known a love story to compare with this. When Rhett Butler meets Scarlett O'Hara.
I love you more than I've ever loved any woman. And I've waited longer for you than I've ever waited for any woman.
Let me alone.
Kiss me once.
Can't we ever forget that day at 12 Oaks?
Do you think I could ever forget it? Have you forgotten it? Can you honestly say you don't love me?
No, I don't love you.
It's a lie.
Well, even if it is a lie, do you think I'd go off and leave Melanie and the baby?
I'm not cornered. You'll never corner me, Rhett Butler, or frighten me. You've lived in dirt so long you can't understand anything else. And you're jealous of something you can't understand. Good night.
It's not that easy, Scarlett. You turned me out while you chased Ashley Wilkes, while you dreamed of Ashley Wilkes. This is one night you're not turning me out.
A love affair you'll remember as long as you live, filled with all the fire and fury of the times in which it happened. Gone with the Wind. First picture to win 10 Academy Awards. The most honored, the most talked about motion picture in all film history.
So, as you can see, Gone with the Wind was a huge success on the screen, and it made so much money. As the trailer said, it was up for so many Academy Awards. It was kind of the first big motion picture like that of its time. It was kind of the start of how film is today. Gone with the Wind influenced so much that we do today in filmmaking. And so now I'm going to dive into with the novel. The novel's 1,000 pages long, so although the movie is spectacular, there are so many things that unfortunately were cut from the book that didn't make the film. So with it being such a long novel, the film had to cut certain scenes and minor characters that maybe didn't influence the major plot or the storyline. Which makes sense with 1,000-page novel. I was talking about how most books are between 100,000 and 175,000 words. 1,000-page novel is like double or maybe triple that. So imagine how much these filmmakers had to cut and still get the major point across. It's insane, and they did such a wonderful job with it as well. Some different things from the novel and the film, though, that I noticed, and after researching it, I wasn't alone, is the novel has much darker themes. So, in the novel, the two main characters are Rhett and Scarlett. So, Scarlett is kind of the lead female that you really focus around the whole novel and film. In the novel, she has a much darker tone to her. She is more complex. You really get to see what she's thinking, and you really get to understand her thoughts. Whereas in the film, you really miss that. She kind of is seen as more, I don't want to say ditzy, but she's definitely not the same as she is in the novel. And maybe that was just a character choice, a producer's or a director's choice. But either way, there are some major differences in her character specifically. Another thing that was cut that was originally in the novel is the racial tension. Now, there is still obviously some of that there. This takes place during the Civil War, but a lot of it that happened in the book had a lot of backlash when the book was first published. So the filmmakers actually cut a lot of that out. There was a lot of references to the Klan in the novel, and the film did that in a more subtle way. Whereas if you didn't read the novel, you wouldn't know that that's what it was referencing towards. Also, some characters in the novel that were essentially black were turned to white in the film. Whether that be because of this racial tension, I think that's why, or maybe it was just a casting choice, but For me personally, I felt like it was a racial choice because of the backlash that the novel got, but that's just my opinion. Um, Another thing is obviously it's a longer story, so we had more plots, we had more character connections, more relationships that didn't make it onto the big screen, unfortunately. But with that, it's still a wonderful film. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it and reading the novel. They both are two entirely different experiences, but they're both wonderful. So next, I'm going to really get into the revenue that this film made. So like the trailer said, this film was very, very successful, and that was right around when it first came out. I can't even imagine if a trailer came out for it today. It would be freaking insane. So, the film itself, now, granted, this is with inflation, but in 2013, it actually made the Guinness Book of World Records um, with a global gross revenue of $3.44 billion. Now that is insane. You have to take into consideration though that the price for a movie ticket back then was about $1.26, which if you translate that with inflation now, that's about $17.46. So that's where that $3.44 billion is coming from. It essentially didn't make that much in 1940 because that kind of money didn't exist. But in today's world, that's how much it would have made, and that's just insane to think about. No movie has really come close to beating that yet. The novel was very successful too, though, and that's not the case in a lot of situations. Sometimes the film or the TV show really takes over and is more well known, but in this case, the book is still read in hundreds of classrooms today. It's still read all around the world, as is the movie. Um, so I'm going to focus on right when it came out. The book actually sold over 2 million books in the first 2 years, which is crazy during this time period. So it was really successful right off the bat, and it also won a Pulitzer Prize in 1938, which is also a huge accomplishment as well. So I highly recommend this film and novel. It's a great duo. This franchise is amazing. The casting is awesome. Um, so that leads us into our next film that we're going to dive into. It's more modern. So this is The Hunger Games. So The Hunger Games was written by Suzanne Collins, and the first book actually came out in 2008. It is part of a 3-book trilogy, a 4-book movie series. They split up the last book into 2 movies if you aren't familiar with it. So this first movie, The Hunger Games, actually came out in 2012. And I'm just going to go right into it. So, this film, I'm assuming you guys have a little bit more knowledge on. It's a lot more modern. I know a lot more people have seen it maybe than Gone with the Wind. So some differences that happened between the novel and the film is the novel was written in first person. So it was all from Katniss's point of view, her perspective. And I really appreciated that because it really allowed the readers to become really close with Katniss, and you really got to understand her and why she thought the certain ways that she did and why she did the certain things that she did. One thing I really appreciated in the film, though, is we still got that aspect of Katniss. We still felt that closeness with her, but it was told in third person, so we got to experience that connection with several other characters. And allowing us to have it be in third person actually allowed the viewers to see a lot of the background stuff that happened in the novel that we didn't know about because Katniss wouldn't have known about it, so how would the readers know? So we definitely had a bigger role from President Snow, from Gale, the people back home in District 12. All of these different characters really had a good chance of developing in the film, I guess. And it's all because it was written in third person that allowed that to happen. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the character descriptions. So in the novel, Suzanne Collins wrote that Katniss had olive skin with dark, dark brown hair and gray eyes. Whereas in the film, for whatever reason, Jennifer Lawrence, who plays Katniss, had medium to dark brown hair with pale skin and green eyes. In my opinion, I feel that the filmmakers could have done a better job of really grabbing Suzanne's vision of Katniss and putting that into Jennifer Lawrence. But overall, I think the actor did a marvelous job of becoming her, regardless of the characteristics. The other character that I want to mention is Peeta Mellark. So he's the other main male character in the movie, and in the novel, he's described as being a baker's boy, so he's a little bit heavier, a little bit bulkier, and then he has blonde hair and blue eyes. Whereas in the film, Josh Hutcherson, who plays him, is a little bit shorter, a little smaller, and he has blonde hair and brown eyes. So it's just these subtle changes that not a lot of people pick up on, but reading the novels several times and watching the movie several times, you start to pick up on things like that. And after researching it, a lot of other people agreed with me on that. So that was nice to see. Another thing that probably upsetted me the most between the novel and the film is the mutations at the end of the Hunger Games. So, in this part of the movie, Peeta and Katniss have made it to the end of the games and they're heading towards the cornucopia where these wolf like demonic creatures come chasing after them, and they have the faces of all the dead tributes that have been killed in the game so far. And it's this huge thrilling moment in the novel that really like is a nail biter, like you just can't stop reading. I was really excited to see that in the film, and unfortunately I was really let down along with a lot of other previous fans when they went to see the film for the first time, is because for whatever reason the filmmakers created a oversized pit bull really to come chase after them, and I think it took away from the dramatic effect of it. Having the tributes faces on there were, it was such a huge moment in the book, and I thought that the filmmakers kind of glossed over that, and I wish they would have done a better job in that specific moment. Now we're going to talk about the money. So this film alone grossed nearly $500 million, and that's in less than 10 years, and I think that's incredible. It also was put up and won several movie awards at the MTV Movie Awards, as well as some People Choice Awards, so it was really successful right off the bat. And then the franchise as a whole, so all the movies are out now. It's even more successful. I could look up the numbers, but I'm going to guess it's made over $1 billion or more dollars altogether, which is insane. The novel is successful too, not as successful as the films, unfortunately, but it has sold more than 50 million copies of all three of the books, so it's still a huge, huge success. I think Suzanne Collins' now income is $33 million from these books, so the odds are definitely in that woman's favor. She is doing very well from these books. So that's kind of why I chose them, is because I thought that the Hunger Games, although there was a lot of differences, I thought the filmmakers did a great job of grabbing that world of Panem, that futuristic world, and putting it on the big screen. And it's incredible what they can do with the new computer systems and how they can work with and create these kind of fictional worlds and allow us to see them as viewers, I think is incredible. So that's one of the other reasons I decided to do this film. Last but not least, though, we are going to talk about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, kind of interchangeable nowadays. So Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone actually was written by J.K. Rowling in 1997. It's one of 7 books surrounding the wizarding world of Harry Potter. As you already know, the movie came out in 2001 and the book came out in 1997. I hope that a lot of you guys are familiar with Harry Potter. It's such a huge franchise. I think you'd have to live under a rock to not know about him. Another huge thing between this specific book and movie is it's probably the closest mirrored movie book translation that's probably ever been done in some people's eyes. They did a marvelous job of taking Rowling's image and really putting it on the big screen. But with that, there are still some differences between the novel and the film. So, the first thing I'm going to point out are some character descriptions. So, in the novel, maybe some of you guys that haven't read the book don't know this, but Dudley and Aunt Petunia were actually written as blonde hair and blue eyes. whereas in the movie they're brown hair and brown eyes. And I think that that was a mistake on the filmmaker's part to cast them like that, because I think Rowling's knew what she was doing by making them blonde hair, blue eyes, because it really contrasts Harry, and it kind of gets you to know right off the start that they are enemies, they are opposites, and it doesn't take much for the eyes to really see that, having it be blonde hair, blue eyes, and Harry with brown hair. Um, and then another character choice that is different in all the films is Hermione Granger. Is J.K. Rowling's wrote in a news conference one time that she said, I envisioned Hermione as myself as a young girl, and I had very frizzy hair with buck teeth. And so a lot of people have taken that character and compared it to J.K. Rowling's childhood pictures, and it's it's similar, but it's not. Obviously, uh, Emma Watson doesn't have the buck teeth, which I think is maybe just a casting choice. I mean, she was a little girl and that'd be hard to do, but she did have the big frizzy hair for this first film, but you kind of lose it in the other films, unfortunately. But those are some character descriptions I noticed. I'm going to go over to the film side now. One thing I really enjoyed that the movie did is the mirror of erased. So, in the novel, Harry looks into the mirror and he sees his parents, but with all of his other extended family. And it was a very sentimental and empowering, heartwarming moment until you watch the film and it's just his parents, and it becomes even more heartwarming and just like special. Um, it became a bigger moment, I think, by having it just be his parents. So I thought that was an excellent choice on the filmmaker's part, and it shows, and it actually made the movie just a little bit more successful in that one scene. I thought it was just amazing. And so then I'm going to skip back over to the novel. So one difference that I noticed right off the bat is how Harry meets Draco. So in the novel, he meets at a wardrobe shop, and Draco's really mean to Hagrid, and they have that kind of interaction. That's where they first meet. And then later on the Hogwarts Express, they have an interaction again. Whereas in the film, for whatever reason, maybe it was due to unimportance or to speed things up. I mean, these are already pretty lengthy films. They had their first meeting be at the Sorting Hat ceremony, where they're getting put into their respected houses. So that was just a little difference that I noticed. And after researching it, it came up on quite a few different sites of things that were different between the movie and the film, or the movie and the novel, excuse me. And then lastly, there are some missing characters, and that's going to happen in any film. So one missing character specifically that I missed in this movie is Peeves the Poltergeist. So in the novel, he was kind of a fun character that was here and there, and you kind of got a little background story from him. You get him having some snide remarks toward Harry, and I missed that in the film. So overall, those are very nitpicky details, and the differences obviously don't change the outcome of the story. But they there are differences, and overall, though, I really appreciate the film. I thought it did a great job of bringing J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World of Harry Potter to life for the first time, and it really got me, as well as probably millions of other people, hooked on this franchise, which is what I'm going to go into next. This film has grossed nearly $1 billion, let alone the Harry Potter franchise has made nearly $33 billion now. That is absolutely insane. It is the biggest movie franchise in existence right now of all the films and books together. It's insane. The novels, one reason I picked this to go last is because my previous movie novel comparisons, the novel always did good, but not as good as the film. These novels actually have done just as good, if not better, than the Harry Potter movies, which is crazy. It's made over $500 million in copies of the books. J.K. Rowling's alone makes like $2 billion because of this. So these movies have been a wild, wild success. And that's why I chose them to go last, is because with them selling over 500 million copies of these books, they actually became the best-selling book series in history. Like, they have made history in the film industry, in the novel book industry. So that's what I really wanted to end with, is because even though they're such different platforms, this specific franchise worked so well hand in hand with the book and the film industry to really bring the essential plot to life, and that's why I wanted it to go last. So that will conclude my presentation. I really hope that you guys maybe learn something about the differences between films and movies, and maybe why directors choose to do certain things, as well as maybe get a better understanding of some of these films if you guys weren't familiar with them. So thank you. Here is my works cited page real quick.